I'm gonna be honest, when I pledged to play through all of the Castlevania franchise, I did not expect a 3D fighter to be one of those games. But here we are, and oh, this hurts. Welcome back, Classy Crew, to another Castlevania Diary, the second last one, or at least I hope it is, in my 4-year journey now to complete the entire Castlevania franchise. And Castlevania Judgement, a lot of people don't seem to know this existed, myself included when I took on the pledge, but it is a Wii game from 2008 where it pits a bunch of different Castlevania characters in a 3D fighting game. So part of the pledge has Castlevania in the title. I have to complete it. So my first impression of the game, it took me a while to get my Wii U connected with the whole motion control and finding my controllers to play this game. I had my Wiimote and my nunchuck, and I was like, oh, can I play this just with the Wiimote? Do I need Wiimote and nunchuck? I get into the first fight and I realize this game supports motion control. You can play this entire fighting game just by wiggling your Wiimote around. And I was like, heck no, I am not doing a fighting game with a Wiimote. So I scrambled to find my Pro Controller, which I haven't used in a really long time. I just gotta say, like, going back to the Wii days when it's all stored away is such a pain. I don't know if you guys remember having to have the sensor bar, placing under the TV, calibrating. Anything that you want to plug other than the Wiimote, you have to put it in the Wiimote, and then you have to make sure your Wiimote has batteries. What an archaic time to play games. It was tough. So anyways, this game, you can expect pretty much the same kind of stuff you would see in any 3D fighting game. It's got arenas, it's got characters, and you pretty much have an arcade mode, story mode, versus mode, all of that. There's nothing really unique here. I was kind of hoping to see a little bit more of interesting Castlevania lore. The lore is very light in the sense that there's a new character introduced just for this game called Aeon. He's some kind of time-traveling anime character, and he basically interacts with about 12 Castlevania characters and says, oh, if you really want what you seek, you have to fight 10 people. And so that is story mode. You get like 3 paragraphs of text for every character. Then you go through 10 fights, culminating in a fight that is supposed to be kind of iconic to the main character. Like, that is kind of their desire. And then after that, you collect a little thing called a soul key that goes into like this kind of clock thing. And so as part of my pledge, I figured if I stuck to story mode and completed story mode, unlocked every character, that should give me pretty much a good sense of what this game is to make it count towards finishing towards a diary entry. So in story mode, you start off with Simon Belmont. Not the Simon Belmont you might know as the design from Smash or any other version of Simon, but no, this is Simon Belmont as designed by the author and artist of Death Note. So that's very interesting because Death Note was a lot more popular back in 2008, I guess. So yeah, this is kind of a young Simon Belmont with more anime flair and even some Kingdom Hearts kind of like clothing to him. So you go through it and you end up pretty much your like arch nemesis at the end is Trevor Belmont. And now that we have Trevor in a really cool design on the Netflix series, we unfortunately have to look at this old grandpa Trevor who's I gotta do that.
Must prove yourself worthy of my whip. Show me.
No, none of this is necessary. The game plays like you would expect. You move left, you move right. You have like 2 attacks. You can jump. You have a special, and then you can kind of like try to figure out what to do in the 3D, like go foreground, background. I don't really know how to explain a 3D fighter. I don't play a lot of them. I used to, but I've always preferred 2D fighting games. And even then, I'm not very good at them. So this is not the genre of game I signed up for. It also has, I could see some clear, good matchups where some characters were more ranged, some were more melee, some were more like technical, some were more speed, some were more heavy. So you could really have different styles of play, and there were some matchups that were a lot harder than others. So when you're going through story mode, you're going through 10 fights. And all of the characters, so you've got Simon Belmont, you've got his grandpa, Trevor. I think he's his grandpa, or is Simon the grandpa of Trevor? They also added Grant, which I absolutely hate. He is the worst character in this game. You've got Sifa, who is Trevor's eventual, the mage who Trevor hooks up with. You've got Carmilla, the evil vampire lady. You've got Maria Alucard from Symphony of the Night. You've got Shanoa, which at this time, that, oh man, I forget the name of that game, but the one with Shinoa in it, I think that had just released on 3DS when this game came out. So she was like kind of the new fancy character, and honestly, one of my favorite characters. You've got Cornell from the N64 Castlevania games. I'm surprised they even brought back the N64 game. You've got Death, and this is a really weird character here. I like his design. I'm not feeling. He's just a really skinny version of Death. You got Golem, who is amazing. He's my best boy. He's pretty much trying to figure out why he's alive, and he kind of is just a happy boy that smashes things. And then you've got Dracula, which iconic. I was surprised you don't see him more often. You pretty much fight off against him once or twice in the story mode, and then you can become him, and you don't really see him too much. He's not always the final boss, which is very strange. And then you've got Eric, which was a kid that honestly, I don't remember too much about him. I think he was one of the DS games. Didn't realize he was such a young kid. Maybe this is a younger version of him. But he's the one he's got like a spear in this game, which is a pretty cool mechanic. So you start off as Simon, you go through 10 fights, you get a shard, you unlock a new character. You take that character, you go through 10 fights, you get another shard, you unlock. So that whole process takes maybe like 5-6 hours, depending on how good you are. I'm not great. One thing I will note is Dracula, super hard to fight, but also super cool to play as. He basically doesn't fall on his back ever. You cannot knock down Dracula. So he's just constantly just hovering, and he can just tank all the damage, and he just goes like fluh, fluh, and he just teleports, and you can like just unleash every attack and just slap people away. It feels really good to play as Dracula. So then once you complete that chrono thing with all of the soul keys, you unlock the ability to face the true boss, and now the game pretty much asks you, everything you just did, do it again, so that you can now send all these characters back to their proper time period. I was like, oh, come on. Like, I was so done with this game, and to have to do it all over again was defeating. So I go back, I pick Simon, I go do a whole other run through him. This time at the end, you actually have to fight Aeon after the final boss, because Aeon's like, it's either me or you. One of us goes through the door, and you're like, okay, what are you talking about? And then once you beat him, you unlock a super boss called, what's this guy called? The Time Reaper, which is not a fight, not a traditional fight. He's actually a boss with like a rotation of attacks. The first time it's hard because you don't know what's going to happen, but once you learn the attacks, how to maneuver, it's super easy to dodge because he just sticks to the script, and it's pretty much memorization. And then once you beat that, then you finally unlock the final character, which is Aeon as a playable character, who's pretty cool because he's got like these like scissor like things. He kind of uses his watch, but it gets big and you can like slice with it. You can also like unleash a huge cannon, like almost like a Kamehameha. It's a really cool fight. But after that, I pretty much gave up. I think you can keep like farming the soul keys to eventually get alternative costumes for characters. I was like, I'm not about that. Like, I heard, I think Shinoa, if you get 100 shards, you get like, I think that's the rarest or something of unlocks. I'm just like, nope, I'm not here for grinding. These diaries are about, let's see what these games are about. Let's beat them, and then let's move on. So that's what it was. There's a good diversity of stages, and I was pleasantly surprised that there's hazards, although they're not evenly distributed. So there's 10 stages in this game. Some notable ones, I'm not going to go through all of them. There's one where there's like zombies or merman that show up and you have to fight them. So they're like, the hazards is there's other enemies on the stage, which I enjoyed that one. The clock tower is pretty cool, and that unlocks after you finish unlocking all the characters. You are pretty much fighting on the cogs, and you can hit the pillars of the cogs to knock them out, so it shrinks the arena, which is interesting. You've got some areas that you can knock out, like the cathedral. You can break the windows and knock people out. There's the bridge where you can knock a person off the bridge. So those were fun, and the worst possible room, I have to say, is the torture chamber. There is so many devices here trying to kill you. There's a poison swamp. There are spikes. There's a big, like, chopper slicing. You can barely position yourself anywhere. It's really hard to fight because you're constantly fighting against all of the the booby traps, basically. When it comes to my favorite character, though, I have to say Alucard, probably the best, like, friendliest, best new player friendliness character. He can move easily, he can dodge, he doesn't have like long animations on his attacks, so that was the best. The worst was probably Grant. I hated fighting him, and I hated being him. So after Alucard, I think Shinoa is my second character, and everyone else is pretty even. They all actually, Maria is probably the weirdest because she's got some really hard to telegraph moves, and she's summoning like animals and jumping in places you wouldn't expect. So that one was the weirdest. But overall, this was a weird game to play. It's not like the action games, not like the Metroidvania. It doesn't even have an interesting story to bring it all together. If this is like, unless you are a die-hard Castlevania fan, I really don't recommend playing this because there's not much there outside of like somebody invested resource into doing this. Cool. +1 to gamer knowledge. That's about it. So I'll see you on the next Castlevania Diary, and until next time, keep it classy.